Purple-black streaks crawled up Captain Ryan Halstead's forearm like poison ivy, the kind of discoloration that made seasoned surgeons reach for bone saws without a second thought. His vitals flickered on the monitor, erratic and shallow, fading with each passing minute. The OR at Mercy Ridge Medical Center buzzed with controlled panic. Scalpels gleamed under surgical lights. Anesthesia dripped steadily into his IV line. Dr. Marcus Vance, the hospital's star surgeon, stood over the table with the confidence of a man who had never been wrong. "We amputate in 6 minutes," Vance announced. "Prep the limb." No one argued. No one questioned. Except the captain himself. His eyes cracked open, glassy, unfocused, scanning the room like a man searching for something vital he had lost. Then they locked onto a figure standing near the back wall. A nurse. Young. Unremarkable. The kind of person you walked past without a second glance. But Captain Halstead didn't look away. He lifted his good hand, slow and trembling, and saluted her. The room went silent. Vance froze mid-glove adjustment. A resident dropped a clamp. Someone whispered something that no one could quite make out. The nurse didn't move, didn't react, just stared back at him with the kind of stillness that only comes from seeing too much. Then the captain spoke, his voice ragged and breaking. "You saved me once. Don't let them take my arm." Elena Ward had been a ghost at Mercy Ridge for 3 months. She floated through shifts like vapor restocking supply carts, charting vitals, answering call lights that more senior nurses ignored. She spoke only when spoken to, and even then barely. Her scrubs were always slightly wrinkled, her hair pulled back tight, no makeup, no jewelry, nothing that invited attention. That was exactly how she wanted it. The hospital treated her like furniture. Doctors walked past without acknowledgement. Senior nurses dumped the worst assignments on her bedpan rounds, post-op cleanups, the confused dementia patients who threw food and screamed at shadows. Elena took it all without complaint. She clocked in at 6, clocked out at 6, and went home to an apartment so bare it looked like a storage unit. No photos on the walls, no plants, no signs that anyone actually lived there. She had gotten very good at disappearing. But tonight someone saw her anyway. "Ward, you're in OR 7, the charge nurse barked without looking up from her clipboard. "They need an extra pair of hands for an emergency amputation." Elena's stomach dropped, but her face stayed flat. "Yes, ma'am." She walked the long hallway toward the surgical wing. The OR smelled like bleach and fear, a combination she recognized from places far worse than this. She had spent 3 months carefully avoiding this part of the hospital. Too many lights, too many eyes, too many chances for someone to notice that she moved wrong, thought wrong, reacted wrong. But orders were orders. OR 7 was already a battlefield when she stepped inside. Captain Ryan Halstead lay on the table, half-conscious, his right arm exposed and horrifying. The flesh from elbow to wrist had turned a mottled purple-black, veins bulging like knotted rope beneath skin that looked ready to split. Blood pressure readings blinked red. Heart rate spiked and plummeted in erratic waves. 2 IVs ran wide open. A ventilator hissed in the corner, prepped but not yet deployed. Dr. Marcus Vance stood at the head of the table, all swagger and sharp angles. He had the kind of face that belonged on a hospital billboard. Square jaw, silver temples, eyes that radiated certainty. He had performed over 2,000 surgeries, never lost a malpractice suit, never apologized. The residents orbited him like moons, eager and terrified in equal measure. "This is textbook compartment syndrome with vascular compromise," Vance said, not to anyone in particular, just stating facts like he was narrating his own legend. "We remove the limb or he loses his life. Simple math." Elena moved to the corner of the room, pulling on gloves with the kind of muscle memory that didn't require thought. She wasn't supposed to be part of the surgical team, just another body to hand off instruments, hold retractors, stay quiet and invisible. But her eyes were on the arm. Something was wrong. The discoloration wasn't spreading the way necrosis spread. It was too uniform, too controlled. The edges were sharp, almost geometric, like something had been applied externally rather than rotting from within. And the veins weren't collapsing. They were rigid, distended, engorged with blood that had nowhere to go. She had seen this before, not in a textbook, not in a lecture hall, in a field hospital outside Kandahar, under a canvas tent with mortar fire shaking the walls and a 19-year-old Marine screaming that he would rather die than lose his arm. She had saved that arm, saved 6 others like it, and every single surgeon had told her it was impossible. "Prepping for amputation," Vance announced. "Let's move. Time is tissue, people." The resident reached for the bone saw. Elena's pulse spiked. This wasn't her case, wasn't her patient, wasn't her business. Stay invisible. That was when Captain Halstead's eyes opened. He didn't scream, didn't thrash. He just turned his head, slow and deliberate, and scanned the room until he found her. Elena felt the weight of his gaze like a hand on her shoulder. He lifted his good arm and saluted. The room stopped. Then the captain spoke, voice barely audible over the hum of the monitors. "You saved me once. Don't let them take my arm." Vance let out a sharp laugh, the kind that cut through tension and re-established control. "Captain, you're disoriented. The medication." "No." Halstead's voice was stronger now, clearer. "Her. I want her." Vance turned to Elena, eyebrows raised. "Who are you?" "Elena Ward, nurse, 3rd floor rotational." "Well, Nurse Ward, the captain is experiencing traumatic shock and possible hallucinations. Step back and let us work." But Halstead didn't look away from her. His good hand trembled, but the salute held. "She's not just a nurse." Elena could walk out. She could stay silent. She could let this moment pass and disappear back into the background where she belonged. But the arm on that table wasn't dying from compartment syndrome. It was dying from a misdiagnosis. And if she said nothing, a man would lose his arm for no reason. Elena stepped forward. Vance's expression hardened. "Excuse me? I need to see the arm. You need to step back. Doctor, if you amputate now, you'll be removing a functional limb." The resident actually laughed. Vance's jaw tightened. He stepped toward her, close enough that she could see the vein pulsing in his temple. "Listen very carefully, Nurse Ward. I have been practicing medicine for 23 years. I have published in 4 major journals. I have taught at Johns Hopkins. Unless you have a medical degree I don't know about, I suggest you shut your mouth and do your job." Elena didn't flinch. She looked him dead in the eye and said, "I don't have a degree, but I have treated more battlefield vascular injuries than every surgeon in this room combined." Total silence. "This isn't necrosis," she continued. "It's a high-pressure hematoma with secondary ischemia. You cut into that arm, you'll sever the brachial artery and kill him in under 3 minutes." Vance's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You're out of line." "I'm right. Get out of my OR." "No." The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. No one told Dr. Marcus Vance no. Not residents, not nurses, not hospital administrators. His face flushed red. He turned toward the door. "Security. Now." But before anyone could move, Halstead's voice cut through the room like a drill sergeant's bark. "She's not leaving." Vance spun back. "Captain, you're not in a position to... I'm a Navy SEAL. I've had my guts stitched together on a helicopter. I've been shot, burned, and blown halfway across a compound. And I'm telling you that woman saved my life before. If she says you're wrong, you're wrong." Vance stared at Elena, long, hard, searching, and somewhere deep in his surgeon's brain, doubt had started to creep in, the kind of doubt that ends careers. Elena used the silence. She stepped closer to the table, leaned over the arm. Up close, the details were unmistakable. The swelling was localized, not systemic. The discoloration had sharp borders, not the diffuse spread of true necrosis. The veins were engorged but intact, distended with trapped blood, not collapsed from lack of flow. She pressed 2 fingers just above the elbow, felt for a pulse. Found it. Weak, thready, but there. How long ago was the injury? 6 hours, Halstead said through gritted teeth. Fell during a training drill. Landed on my arm. Thought it was just a bad bruise. Did you feel a snap? Any sudden pop? No, just pressure, like something burst inside. Did the pain get worse when you tried to move your fingers? Yeah, felt like my whole arm was going to explode. Elena straightened and turned to Vance. The brachial artery didn't rupture. It spasmed. Blood pooled under the fascia and started compressing the surrounding tissue. He didn't lose circulation, you trapped it. Vance scoffed, but his voice had lost its edge. That's speculative. It's a field diagnosis. I've seen it a dozen times. You want to amputate because you're looking at the symptoms, not the cause. You see dead tissue and assume the vessel is gone. It's not. It's locked down. And how would you propose we unlock it? Fasciotomy, immediate decompression. You release the pressure, restore the flow, you save the arm. That's a massive risk. Amputation is a guarantee. This is a chance. Vance stared at her. The room held its breath. Then slowly he turned to the resident. Prep for fasciotomy. The resident blinked. Doctor? You heard me. Elena moved to the table. The scalpel felt familiar in her hand, too familiar. The weight, the balance, the way the light caught the edge. She had held this exact instrument in a dozen field hospitals, in cargo holds, in bombed-out buildings with no power and no backup. She positioned the blade over the lateral forearm, just below the elbow, where the fascia was thickest. One cut clean, controlled. The tissue split and blood surged out, dark and thick. Pressure released like a broken dam. The swelling began to visibly decrease. The skin tone shifted from black-purple to deep red, then pink. The resident gasped. Vance said nothing, just watched, stunned. Elena worked fast, extended the incision, released the remaining compartments, irrigated the wound, checked for active bleeding. Her hands moved with a precision that didn't belong to a floor nurse. Every motion was deliberate, trained, automatic. Her body knew what to do. 4 minutes later, the arm had a pulse. Oxygen saturation's climbing, the anesthesiologist announced. Perfusion restored. We've got capillary refill. The resident leaned in, eyes wide. I can see the color coming back. Vance stared at the arm like it had defied the laws of physics. Elena stepped back, stripped off her gloves, and tossed them into the waste bin. Close him up, she said quietly. Then she turned toward the door. Wait. Halstead's voice, weak but clear. Elena stopped, didn't turn around. What's your real name? He asked. Then quieter. Your call sign. I know you had one. The room went dead silent. Elena's hand hovered over the door handle. She could feel every set of eyes on her back, the weight of a past she had buried under 3 months of invisibility. She didn't answer, but Captain Ryan Halstead did. Valkyrie. The word hit the room like a lightning strike. Vance's head snapped toward her. The resident took a step back. Elena pushed through the door and disappeared into the hallway. Behind her, she heard Vance's voice sharp and shaken. Someone find out who she really is. Elena didn't go back to the nurse's station. She didn't clock out. She walked straight to the stairwell, down 3 flights and out into the employee parking lot, where the night air was cold and clean. Her hands were steady, her breathing was even, but inside, everything was unraveling. She had been careful, so careful. New name, new city, new life. No references that dug past the surface, no background checks that went deeper than 6 months. She had buried Valkyrie under layers of paperwork and deliberate mediocrity, and now, in one operating room, it had all come undone. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. This is Elena. The voice was clipped, professional, military. Nurse Ward, this is Colonel Vincent Shaw, JSOC Medical Command. We need to talk. I'm off duty. This isn't a request. Captain Halstead's status just went critical. He's coding, and you're the only person in that hospital who knows what really happened to him. Elena was already moving back toward the building. I'm on my way. By the time she hit the 4th floor, alarms were screaming. Or 7's doors were open. Inside, chaos, compressions, shouts, the flatline wail of a monitor. Vance was at the head of the table, hands bloody, face pale. Again, charge to 200. The defibrillator whined. Pads pressed against Halstead's chest. Nothing. Elena shoved past a nurse and stepped into the center of the storm. Vance saw her and didn't hesitate. Didn't question, didn't argue. If you've got something, he said, now's the time. She looked at the monitors, looked at Halstead's chest, saw the problem immediately. Stop compressions. What? Stop. Now. The resident froze, hands still on Halstead's sternum. Vance stared at her. If we stop, he's got a tension pneumothorax. You're compressing air into his chest cavity. Every pump is killing him faster. Vance's face went white. Elena grabbed a 14-gauge needle from the crash cart, positioned it over the second intercostal space, and drove it in. A hiss of air escaped immediate, loud, like a tire deflating. The flatline stuttered, then beeped. Once, twice. A rhythm. Pulse, the anesthesiologist shouted. We've got a pulse. The room erupted in relief. Vance staggered back, hands shaking for the first time Elena had ever seen. The resident looked like he might pass out. Elena secured a chest tube and stepped away without a word. Halstead's eyes fluttered open. He looked at her, smiled weakly, and whispered, "Told you." She turned to leave, but this time she didn't make it to the door. Because standing in the hallway, flanked by 2 military police in full-dress uniform, was Colonel Vincent Shaw, and he wasn't smiling. They walked to a private conference room in the admin wing. Shaw closed the door. The MPs stayed outside. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he slid a photo across the table. It was her 3 years younger, hair shorter, uniform crisp, standing in front of a Humvee with a rifle slung over her shoulder and a medic's bag at her feet. "Sergeant Elena Mercer," Shaw said quietly. 68W combat medic, 75th Ranger Regiment, 3 tours Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, 16 commendations, 2 Bronze Stars, 1 Silver Star. Call sign, Valkyrie. He looked up. "You want to tell me why a decorated combat medic is pretending to be a civilian nurse? That person doesn't exist anymore. Clearly she does, because she just saved a Navy SEAL's life twice. I did my job." "No, you did your old job." Shaw's eyes hardened. "You went AWOL 3 years ago, Sergeant. Just vanished. We looked hard, and now here you are, hiding in a second-rate hospital under a false name." Elena's jaw tightened. "I left, that's all. People don't just leave the Rangers, not people like you, not without a reason. I left because I couldn't do it anymore," she said finally. "The deployments, the casualties. I watched too many people die, saved too many who shouldn't have needed saving, and one day I just couldn't." She met his eyes. "So I walked away." Shaw nodded slowly. "And now? Now I keep my head down, do my job, and don't get noticed." "Too late for that." He stood and moved toward the door. "Captain Halstead wants to meet you properly, not as a patient, as a soldier." He paused with his hand on the handle. "You've got 24 hours to decide. You can keep running, or you can face this. Your call." He left. Elena sat alone in the small room with the fluorescent lights humming overhead. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't know what to do. The call came at midnight. Halstead was crashing again. Elena ran back to the hospital, back to OR 7, back into the storm. This time it was a second pneumothorax opposite side, exactly as she had feared. The initial injury had destabilized both lungs. She handled it the same way, fast, clean, certain. When Halstead's eyes opened, he wasn't confused. He looked right at her. "Kandahar," he said. 2021. Convoy hit an IED. My unit was pinned down. Medic was dead. I was bleeding out with a piece of shrapnel in my chest." He took a breath. "You pulled me out. Told me to stay alive because you didn't drag my ass 200 yards just to watch me quit." The room went silent. "I remember the voice," he said. "I remember the hands. And I remember thinking, whoever this is, she isn't afraid of anything." Elena nodded, let go of his hand, and turned to leave. Vance caught her arm. "Who are you, really?" She pulled free. "Nobody." She made it to the elevator before the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent, hot, and unwelcome. Colonel Shaw was waiting on the ground floor. He looked at her face, saw the tears, didn't comment. "Captain wants to put you in for a commendation," he said quietly. "Tell him no." "He's not asking." Shaw handed her a card. "You can keep hiding your skills, or you can use them. Either way, this hospital is going to start asking questions." I'd rather you had backup when they do. Elena took the card. Shaw stepped into the elevator. Call me when you're ready to stop running, Sergeant. The doors closed. Elena stood in the empty lobby with the card in her hand and the weight of 3 years pressing down on her shoulders. And for the first time since she had disappeared, she wondered if running had ever really worked at all. What Vance found when he dug into Elena Ward's records was nothing. A nursing license too clean. Employment history that went back exactly 6 months. References that checked out on the surface and went nowhere underneath. It was a person built from scratch, assembled carefully, but missing the details that made someone human. He sat in his office at 4 a.m, coffee gone cold, and picked up a phone he shouldn't have had. There's a nurse, he said when the line connected. She just performed a battlefield surgical procedure I've never seen outside military journals, and a Navy SEAL called her Valkyrie. Silence on the other end. Then, find her, and when you do, don't let her out of your sight. The next morning, Elena signed the consultant contract Dr. Patricia Kern, the hospital's chief of staff, placed in front of her. Full authority. Trauma surgery consultant. The DIA agents who had come threatening charges found themselves facing a woman who had leverage they hadn't anticipated. But the peace lasted 6 hours. At 8 that evening, the mass casualty alarm sounded. Multi-vehicle accident on the interstate. 18-wheeler, 6 cars, 12 casualties. More incoming. The trauma bay exploded into controlled chaos. Elena and Vance worked side by side, chest tubes, pericardiocentesis, emergency intubations. 12 patients, 8 stable, 3 critical, 1 dead, a 22-year-old, ejected, skull fractured beyond repair. Gone before she could do anything except try. She didn't let herself feel it, not yet. By 9, the bay was quieter. Elena sat in the hallway, scrub soaked with blood that wasn't hers, hands shaking for the first time in years. She pressed them against her knees and forced them still. Vance sat beside her without a word. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Shaw. The accident wasn't an accident. Check the truck driver, Shaw. Her blood went cold. She walked to the ICU where the driver had been taken and examined his personal effects. Wallet, keys, phone, cigarettes, and tucked behind his license a small white card with a single line of text. Valkyrie must answer. She recognized the handwriting. It was hers. From a field report she had written after a mission went wrong 3 years ago. After 6 people died because of a call, she had made a call that saved 2 and condemned 4. A call that had earned her a silver star and sent her running. Someone had kept it. Her phone buzzed again. They know where you are. They know what you did. And they're coming for you. Get out now. Shaw. They arrived at the hospital armed and moving with precision, 4 men in black tactical gear, no badges, no insignia, private military contractors. Elena recognized the lead man the moment she saw him. Lieutenant Marcus Cade, former Delta Force, discharged under murky circumstances, gone private. We're here for the captain, Cade said, his eyes locked on Elena. He has information we need. You can walk away or you can get in the way. Vance stepped forward. You can't walk into a hospital with guns. Cade raised his weapon, not aimed, just visible. A reminder. Elena moved between them. What do you want with Halstead? He knows things he shouldn't, and you made a mistake 3 years ago, Valkyrie. Cade's voice was flat and cold. Kandahar, Operation Redline, 6 KIA. You were the medic. You made the call to save 2 over 4, and one of those 4 was someone important to some very dangerous people. Elena's stomach dropped. She remembered every face, every second of that day. That was war. That was murder. At least that's how his family sees it. Cade turned toward Halstead's door. Elena grabbed the nearest crash cart, shoved it across his path, and hit the red emergency lockdown button on the wall. Steel doors slammed down over every exit. Lights shifted to red. Alarms shrieked. Cade spun, weapon up. What did you just do? Bought time. 4 barrels swung toward her. The hallway went deadly quiet. Then a voice cut through it. Lower your weapons. Colonel Shaw stood at the end of the hallway, flanked by 6 MPs in full combat gear. This is a private contract, Colonel. You don't have jurisdiction. I do when you threaten a decorated Navy SEAL on American soil. Shaw's voice was ice. Lower your weapons. Now. For 5 long seconds, no one moved. Then Cade lowered his gun. His team followed. The MPs moved fast, disarming, zip-tying, clearing the hallway. Cade was dragged away. The lockdown lifted. The alarm stopped. Shaw turned to Elena. "You okay?" She nodded, couldn't speak. In the stairwell 2 floors down, her legs finally gave out. She sat on the concrete steps with her head in her hands. "You made a choice 3 years ago," she said quietly. "Saved 2 people, let 4 die, and now someone wants me to pay for it." Vance grabbed her shoulders, made her look at him. "You prioritized. You saved the lives you could reach. Tell that to their families." "Elena," his voice was firm, "you saved lives tonight. You saved Halstead. You stood between armed men and a patient. That's who you are. Whatever happened 3 years ago, it doesn't define you." She closed her eyes and let the tears she had been holding for 3 years finally break free. Vance didn't let go. 1 hour later, they sat in Shaw's temporary office. "The men who came for Halstead weren't freelance," Shaw said. "They were hired by Victor Aristov, arms dealer former, technically. Now a legitimate businessman with weapons flowing through back channels. 3 years ago, his nephew was one of the 4 you couldn't save." Elena's chest tightened. "I didn't know." "Doesn't matter. He knows. And he wants answers, or revenge, probably both." She shook her head. "I'm done running." Shaw studied her. "You sure about that?" "Positive." Her voice was steel. "I've spent 3 years hiding. 3 years pretending to be nobody. Tonight I remembered who I am. I'm not running anymore. Then we do this the hard way. We draw him out. We set a trap. And we end this." "Using me as bait," Elena said. "Giving you a choice." "I'm in." Shaw opened a laptop. "This is everything we have on Aristov's network. Study it, because tomorrow we go to war." Elena looked at the screen and saw a face she recognized. Someone she had trusted. Someone she had saved. Someone who had just betrayed her. Before she could speak, Vance showed her his phone. A photo sent from an anonymous account, time-stamped 2 minutes ago. Her apartment. Burning. The flames were orange and white against the night sky, bright enough that the photo looked almost fake. But it wasn't. A text appeared below it. "We have everything. You have nothing. Walk away now, or everyone you've touched dies next." Starting with Halstead, Elena looked at the photo of her handwriting her field report from Kandahar and felt something shift inside her. The grief, the guilt, the exhaustion of 3 years of running, all of it crystallized into something cold and precise. Rage, the calculating kind. "Then let's give him what he wants," she said quietly. "Let him think he's winning. We set the trap. We use me as bait. And when he's close enough, we end this." At midnight, the old Mercy Ridge Annex 3 blocks from the hospital, condemned and empty, became a battlefield. Shaw's team of 8 former operators moved through the building like shadows, taking positions, running comms. Elena stood in the center room on the 2nd floor, wired, watched, waiting. Aristov arrived with 9 men. He walked in alone to face her late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit, eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. "Sergeant Mercer, we finally meet. You burned my apartment. I burned a lie." He stepped closer. "You've been hiding for 3 years, playing nurse, pretending to be nobody. But you're not nobody. You're the woman who killed my nephew. I didn't kill him, the insurgents did. You left him to die. Same thing. I saved 2 others. You chose wrong." Elena's jaw tightened. There was no right choice. Aristov's hand moved, and then everything happened at once. He backhanded her. Pain exploded across her cheek. Shaw's voice in her earpiece. "Execute!" Gunfire erupted from the windows. Aristov grabbed Elena's arm and shoved her toward the door. She drove her elbow into his ribs, broke his grip, spun. At the end of the hallway, Vance, standing there with a pistol he had clearly never fired before, hands shaking but steady enough. "Get away from her!" Aristov lunged. Vance fired, missed. They went down together. The gun skittered across the floor. Elena grabbed it. Aristov had his hands around Vance's throat. Let him go. Aristov smiled through bloody teeth. You won't shoot? You're a medic. You save people. I'm also a soldier. She fired. The bullet hit Aristov in the leg. He screamed and released Vance. Shaw's team flooded the hallway. Aristov was zip-tied, bleeding, furious. As they hauled him to his feet, he looked at Elena with pure hatred. This isn't over. Yeah, she said. It is. The night wasn't over. Elena's phone buzzed with a video. Hospital room. Mercy Ridge ICU. Halstead sleeping, and standing beside his bed, adjusting the IV line, was Dr. Gerald Moss. The video zoomed in. A syringe in his other hand, clear liquid. A text appeared below it. Did you think Aristov was the only one who wanted you gone? Check Halstead's potassium levels. You have 3 minutes. Choose wisely, Valkyrie. Elena grabbed Vance. We need to get back, now. They ran. The convoy tore through empty streets, tires screaming. Elena burst through the hospital doors, up the stairs, down the hallway. Halstead was seizing when she entered his room. She ripped out the IV line. Vance drew the reversal agent and pushed it. Calcium gluconate flushed through. The seizing stopped. The monitors stabilized. Moss was gone. Shaw's team found him in the parking garage, cornered beside a black sedan. Behind the wheel was a man Elena didn't immediately recognize, older than his photo, grayer, eyes hollow with grief that had curdled into something worse. Colonel James Brennan, retired Special Forces, father of Lieutenant Sarah Brennan, one of the 4 Elena had left behind at Kandahar. She hadn't recognized his name on the network's communications. She recognized his face now. The sedan surged toward her. She dove. Gunfire shredded the tires. The car slammed into a concrete pillar. Brennan stumbled out, blood on his forehead, gun raised. You left her, he said, his voice breaking. She called for you. She begged. And you didn't come. I couldn't. I was pinned down. 2 soldiers were bleeding out. I made a choice. Elena's voice was steady even as tears burned behind her eyes. Maybe it was the wrong one. Probably it was. But I made it. And I've lived with it every day since. Killing me won't change that. Won't bring her back. Brennan's finger tightened on the trigger. The gunshot came from behind her. Brennan dropped shoulder wound, not fatal. Shaw lowered his rifle and stepped forward. Elena looked at Brennan on the ground, face twisted in pain and grief, and felt nothing but exhaustion and sorrow. They wheeled him away on a gurney. He looked at her one last time. Shaw put a hand on her shoulder. It's over. Is it? She looked at him. How many more, Colonel? How many more times do I have to pay for one decision? Shaw didn't have an answer. Neither did anyone else. Then Elena's phone buzzed with a message she hadn't expected. Congratulations, Captain. You took down Aristov. But before you celebrate, check the file we've left in Vance's car. Then decide if you really won. A friend. She found the file. Opened it. Opened. Inside were mission reports, classified, redacted in places, but enough visible to understand. Operation Redline. The mission where Sarah Brennan died. Except there was more than she knew. Orders. Signed by General Mathesy himself. Orders stating the convoy had been bait, a deliberate target designed to draw out insurgent leadership. Orders acknowledging that acceptable casualties numbered 15 personnel. The convoy had been a trap. Elena's hands shook as she kept reading. An incident report filed 2 weeks after Kandahar, written by Mathesy, praising Sergeant Mercer's conduct under impossible circumstances. And at the bottom, a handwritten note. Mercer is too independent. Recommend discharge or reassignment before she asks questions. She had been set up 3 years ago, and she was being set up again now. Mathesy hadn't wanted her back because she was the best. He wanted her close because she knew too much. When he appeared in the parking garage behind her, calm, hands in his pockets, she already knew what was coming. You weren't supposed to find that, he said. But I did. He smiled. You're going to sign a new contract, a very specific NDA. You don't talk about Kandahar. You don't talk about the setup. And in return, you get to keep breathing. And if I refuse, then you have an unfortunate accident, along with Dr. Vance, Captain Halstead, and anyone else you've gotten close to. Elena looked at him, at the man who had sent her team into a kill box, covered it up, buried her when she tried to disappear, and was now standing in a hospital parking garage threatening civilians. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll sign." Mathesy smiled and placed the contract on the hood of a car. Elena picked up the pen and drove it into the back of his hand. He screamed. She grabbed the file and ran. She triggered the hospital lockdown again, reached Halstead's room, and asked to use his phone. Then she dialed a number she had memorized and never called. "This is Senator Marissa Grant." "Senator, my name is Captain Elena Mercer. I have evidence that General Mathesy knowingly sent soldiers into an ambush 3 years ago, and evidence that he just threatened to kill civilians to keep it quiet. I need your help. Now." A pause. Then, "Where are you?" The federal marshals arrived in 9 minutes. They secured the floor, found Vance and Halstead, and moved everyone to a safe location. 1 hour later, Elena sat across from Senator Marissa Grant in an FBI conference room and handed over everything. Grant read the file without a word. When she finished, she looked up. "This is enough to bury him." "Good. But it will destabilize JSOC Medical Command. Are you prepared for that?" "I'm prepared to tell the truth. Whatever happens after that isn't my problem." It wasn't a slow collapse. It was immediate and complete. Within 6 hours, General Mathesy was placed under arrest, conspiracy, negligent homicide, obstruction of justice. Within 12 hours, the story broke across every major outlet. Headlines about corruption, cover-ups. Dead soldiers turned into budget line items by men with stars on their shoulders. Within 24 hours, Mathesy was dishonorably discharged, stripped of rank, facing decades in federal prison. The investigation that followed exposed Operation Sentinel, a joint military private sector medical initiative run by Nathaniel Cross and his company, Advanced Medical Solutions. They had been embedding contractors with military units for years, charging the government triple rates, running experimental procedures on soldiers without proper consent, and burying the deaths as combat casualties. Billions of dollars. Years of profit. Built on the bodies of people who had trusted the system to protect them. Elena and Vance spent a night flooding every journalist, medical ethics board, and congressional oversight committee they could reach. By morning, the fire hose of evidence made any cover-up impossible. A midnight raid on Cross's warehouse in the Riverside Industrial Park produced Lieutenant Rachel Hayes, the witness who had tried to come forward and been taken. She testified before Congress the following week, her statement detailed and damning. More witnesses came forward, more soldiers who had been used, more families who had lost someone to a cover-up they were never meant to discover. 1 month later, Elena stood outside Mercy Ridge Medical Center. The hospital board had voted unanimously to retain her. Full consultant status, full authority, and a formal apology, delivered in writing, forever considering otherwise. Dr. Kern met her at the entrance. "Ready for your first day back?" "Is it really my first day if I never left?" Kern smiled. "Fair point. We've got a full trauma bay and a resident who needs someone to correct him. Come on." They walked inside together. It felt different, not because anything had changed in the building, but because Elena had changed. She wasn't hiding anymore. Wasn't pretending to be nobody. She was exactly who she had always been. And now everyone knew it. Vance found her in the break room an hour later. "You're famous now. I'm notorious. There's a difference." He handed her a coffee and sat across from her. Senator Grant called. 3 more hearings. Military reform, medical ethics, whistleblower protections. "Tell her I'll think about it." "She said you'd say that. She also said she'd come here herself if you did." Elena almost smiled. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Vance said, "What now?" She looked out the window at the city beyond, at the people moving through their lives, at the ambulance pulling up with another emergency, another life hanging in the balance. "God, this," she said simply, "saving lives, teaching, making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." She looked at him. "That's what's left. That's what matters. Then I'm with you." "You sure? It's not going to be easy. There are still people out there." "I'm sure." They walked toward the trauma bay together. 3 weeks later, Elena stood on the hospital steps for a press conference. Cameras, reporters, microphones, everything she had spent 3 years actively avoiding. A reporter raised her hand. "Captain Mercer, you've been called a hero, a whistleblower, a troublemaker. How do you see yourself?" Elena thought about Kandahar, about 3 years of hiding, about the fights she had fought and the ones she had won, about a dead young woman named Sarah Brennan, and a grieving father who had spent years building a machine of revenge, and a general who had sent 30 people into a kill box and written himself a commendation for it. "I'm a medic," she said. "I save lives. That's all I've ever wanted to do." "But you've done so much more." "Have I? Or did I just refuse to let bad people get away with hurting good ones?" She met the reporter's eyes. "I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm someone who got tired of running and decided to stand instead. Anyone can do that. Anyone can choose to fight back when something's wrong. You don't need medals or rank or permission. You just need to care enough to try." "And what's next for you?" Elena paused. "I go back to work. I teach residents. I save patients. I live my life." She looked at the building behind her, at the place that had been her battlefield and, somehow, her home. "And if someone tries to hurt people again, I'll stand up again. Because that's what we do. That's what all of us should do." "Even if it cost you?" "Especially if it cost you," Elena said. "Because some things are worth the price." The press conference ended. Reporters scattered. Elena walked back inside. That evening, after a 16-hour shift, she sat alone in the hospital parking lot, exhausted, wired, alive. Her phone sat quiet in her pocket. No unknown numbers, no threats, no encrypted messages from shadows she couldn't see. Just the city breathing around her, and the lights of Mercy Ridge glowing overhead, and a future she hadn't planned on but was no longer afraid of. 3 months ago, she had been nobody, invisible, running from a past she couldn't escape. Now she was standing in the light. It terrified her, but it also felt exactly right. She stood, straightened her scrubs, and walked back inside to finish what she had started. Not because anyone ordered her to, not because she owed anyone anything, but because people needed help, and she was exactly the right person to give it. And for the first time in 3 years, that was enough.